Today my session was about telling stories, about what you need first of all to become or to be a storyteller, and then it was about giving examples of stories that teachers could use in the classroom, because my belief is that a good story well told transcends language barriers, and once you capture the hearts and minds of someone through a story, they'll be more inclined to learn the language that they heard that story in, because the story is alive, the language is alive. I think storytelling is incredibly important in a school environment because we are all stories. We're all made up of stories. We all walk around with stories within us, even if it's the story of what happened this morning, the story of why we're late, the story of why we haven't got the homework, the story of why we don't want to play with that child, the story of why you feel nervous in front of one teacher and not in front of another. And then there's the actual telling of the stories, the ability to listen. It trains the mind, it trains the ear to listen. And then there's the inner eye, trains the inner eye to see, to visualize. It helps children to sequence things, sequence of events in a story, helps children to sequence, learning about characters, and then learning that actually that everything that happens within a story, no matter how fantastical the events might be, the impact on the people in the story, everyone can relate to that impact. Well, as a storyteller, the first thing you do is steal from other storytellers. That's a rule. But then you also read stories in books and bring them to life, breathe life into them, as well as finding stories on the internet. But borrowing from other storytellers. And also, some storytellers are very generous, and they'll come to you and say, I read this great story, and it made me think of you, so I want to give you this story, and I think you should tell it. Other storytellers aren't so happy about having their stories told by other stories, particularly because they think, well, I found it, I did all the work, and now that person's telling it. But I personally think that whilst, yes, that person may have prepared it, that person may have done the work, once you tell it, and you're telling it in your own way, and you're telling it in your own style, once it's been told, it's out there. So there are, again, to balance that argument, there are storytellers who never find a new story, never prepare their own story, and just go around borrowing stories from other people. They're kind of a bit suspect, I think, particularly if they're always borrowing stories from other cultures and they don't do any work on their own culture. I think that's a bit strange. There's a lot of English storytellers who never tell English stories. It doesn't make sense to me. You know, there's a lot of rich stories within the English tradition, and I think that they need as much revitalization as possible. So it's a big arena, it's a big argument.